Hi, I'm Phil, and welcome to the first video on my new channel, Advice Gap. Today is going to be a bit of a strange video. I'm going to be talking about my favourite lifetime allowance strategies. It might seem like a bit of a strange time to talk about this, given that the lifetime allowance is going to be scrapped in about a week's time at the time of recording, but I thought it was as good a subject as any for a first video. As I say, the lifetime allowance is going to be scrapped from next week. Don't try and do any of these things yourself. The first strategy is Leased Land. And I can't take any credit for this at all, but it is absolutely genius. So for some background context, this was before we had flexi access. So we had GAD rates to deal with. We also had the quite punitive death benefits for post 75. How this strategy worked, the SIP leased land. It then sublet the leased land. Now the magic here was how they'd managed to orchestrate the figures. So the lease income could be paid out within the GAD limits available at the time, based on the value of the lease at the time of the GAD review. The lease expired just before the client was 75, which avoided a lifetime allowance charge at age 75. I mean, how you could orchestrate such a thing, I've never seen this done since. Arguably, such a strategy hasn't had much use in the pension freedoms era. It's still probably the most innovative LTA solution I've ever seen. So, and the second one, and I'm cheating a bit here because this is a relatively new strategy. This is a strategy that you can currently implement under the current rules, and you'll be able to do something similar under the new rules. Just for simplicity, let's say you had 1,073,100 in a SIP, and then in a separate pension, you have a guaranteed annuity rate. Now, one of the issues with guaranteed annuity rates is whether to take the tax-free cash or not. So you can have 25% of the fund as tax-free, or you can have a generous annuity rate on it. Sometimes it's clear which way is the best. Other times you could go either way. Since last year, you've actually been able to get the best of both worlds if your other pension funds are over the lifetime allowance. So say you have a SIP with 1,073,100 in it, you'd be able to crystallise that and take 25% of that as tax-free. Since the lifetime allowance charge was abolished last year, you can then take the guaranteed annuity rate you have on the small pension, subject to the lifetime allowance charge at zero, and therefore you would benefit for the full guaranteed annuity rate on the whole value of the fund. Now, I've only seen this in one case, and then it turned out that the big plan had protected tax-free cash on it anyway, so it didn't really make all that much difference. This strategy should still work post-April this year. The only difference is the order will no longer be defined. For that strategy to work in the 23-24 tax year, you would have to crystallise enough benefits to use up your entire lifetime allowance before you crystallised your plan with a guaranteed annuity rate. As of next year, it won't matter. If you choose to take the guaranteed annuity rate, it won't use up any of the new tax-free cash allowance. In order to get the maximum, and assuming you've got no protected tax-free cash, you'd still have to then crystallise another 1,073,100 before you were able to get the full tax-free cash amount out. And that's arguably a limited number of people who are in that position, but it does at least allow the flexibility to access your guaranteed annuity rate without having to take tax-free cash from your other plans first. And you can carry on contributing to them until some point in the future if that's what you want to do. Okay, then now the next one, this next one isn't so much a strategy. It's more of a being aware and managing a situation over time. Now, a lot of people don't realise that if you have multiple drawdown pots, and this can actually be multiple drawdown pots in the same scheme, like if you transferred in multiple drawdown pots, they don't get combined. And in some pensions, if you do more than one crystallization, each crystallization will have its own drawdown pot. And that's for the most part fine. But where it can become an issue is on the second test at age 75. Each pot is tested separately. So if what you've done is you've spent all the money in one pot and allowed the others to grow, you might think that there'd be no lifetime allowance charge because your total fund value is lower than the amount you designated into drawdown. Each pot has its own designation and its own fund value. You might find that there is an LTA charge. As it stands, that LTA charge is now zero, so it doesn't matter. And as of next year, it's gone completely. The way to manage that is to be aware of how many pots you have and Try not to create new pots when you don't need them. So first of all, don't crystallize drawdown pots in separate providers. Transfer them into one pension first and then designate them into a single drawdown pot. If you've already crystallized it, there's not much you can do. But if you've only done one, transfer that drawdown plan in first and then designate the others into that. When you draw an income, make sure you take the income from the one that's got the highest growth. While any of your pots have growth on them, don't take from the other pots. Definitely never take money from a pre-A Day pot when you have a post-A Day pot available. There's just no reason to do that. In the current tax year, that problem has already gone. However, that can still affect your tax-free cash entitlement. But then as of next year, it won't be a problem at all. There's still, as far as I've seen, we still can't combine drawdown pots. And really the only reason to not be able to combine them is to be able to keep track of the lifetime allowance. So hopefully that's something that will change in the near future. It's just a general tidy up exercise, which I wish they'd have done when they've brought in all these new rules now, but they haven't done that. It would actually be beneficial for them to do that for annuities as well. The next one relates to tax-free cash aggregation. Now, again, this is only one. I've only seen this once, and in most cases, you probably aren't able to do it. So for a bit of background, if you have a money purchase AVC alongside a defined benefit scheme, quite often you're allowed to take your tax-free cash from the money purchase element, leaving the defined benefit element as mostly income. And the other element to this is usually if you've got a mix of money purchase and benefit, it's usually better to crystallize the money purchase before you crystallize the defined benefit. And the reason for that, when you apply the lifetime allowance charge to defined benefit, it uses the cash factor to determine how much income it's reduced by. And when you do the calculations, it usually looks quite a generous way of doing it. Effectively, the cost is spread out across sometimes decades, rather than paying the lump sum out of the money purchase fund. So where these two elements segue, and on from one particular case, we had a client with a money purchase SIP, a defined benefit scheme, and an AVC. Now, unfortunately, the AVC was worth more than the total tax-free cash entitlement. What we wanted to do was crystallize the SIP first, but only crystallize enough of the AVC alongside the defined benefit scheme to provide the tax-free cash that the client needed. Otherwise, the rest of the AVC was going to be converted into income, which the client didn't need. Now, the scheme had been quite slow in providing the details, so we didn't really expect to be getting much cooperation from them. What we managed to do was devise a strategy where we would partially transfer out of the AVC. We needed to work out what the value of the AVC needed to be to just provide enough to go alongside taking the full income from the DB element. And then we would transfer out the rest. In my experience, most schemes would not let you do a partial transfer out of an AVC. However, in this case, they were more than happy to oblige. We did the calculations, then passed it on to the scheme. They agreed with our figures and allowed us to do the partial transfer. So we were then able to transfer out part of the AVC into the client's SIP, crystallize the whole lot, all of that within the lifetime allowance. We were then able to crystallize the DB scheme alongside its AVC, paying out the full tax-free cash entitlement from the AVC with the lifetime allowance charge levied on the DB scheme in the most optimal way. I was particularly pleased how that one worked out. So just on that, quite a few people think that it's better to take the benefit from the DB scheme first. I tend to I disagree. Can this strategy be used in the future? While there's no lifetime allowance to worry about, you still might be in a situation where you feel forced to convert an AVC into an income that you don't actually need. And you could actually use a similar strategy here, move some of the fund out and just leave enough to use the available tax-free cash allowance. Could work in some circumstances. And the final one I'm going to talk about is what I call protect and bust. You can only really use this ahead of one of the fixed protections being introduced. You would have to have significant funds, but not as much as the fixed protected amount. So, for example, if you had around £1 million when fixed protection 16 was introduced, and you were over 55, you could use this strategy. For a client like that, they're in a bit of a strange situation because at age 55, they probably still want to contribute to their pension and they're not at the lifetime allowance. If they were to have taken fixed protection 16, that would stop them contributing, else they'll lose the protection. The fund can continue to grow on its own, but they wouldn't be able to make any more contributions. However, the fix and bust strategy allows you to cheat a little bit. How it works, you can apply for fixed protection. You lock in a lifetime allowance of 1.25 million. You would then crystallize your existing fund value, take your tax-free cash out. That would use 80% of the lifetime allowance. You could then make a contribution to that pension, busting fixed protection. Your lifetime allowance would then drop from 1.25 million to 1 million. However, your lifetime allowance used will still be 80%. But it will be 80% of 1 million. You would then still have £200,000 of lifetime allowance available. I mean, you do have to worry about recycling rules, and the age 75 test still applied at that point, but it did allow you to put more money in. Anyway, that's it. Those are my 5 favourite lifetime allowance strategies. If you've got any others, put them below. Tell me about them. I'm sorry that the first video on my channel is about something so complicated, which is about to be abolished, recorded in a garage. And if you don't want to hear any more about any of this sort of stuff, definitely don't hit subscribe and definitely don't like. And then you won't see me in the next one. Bye for now.